All right, I'm going to give it a sync. Sweet. Welcome to the Monkey Dance Podcast. This is Ohan. And returning with us as a guest is Aleksandra.
Aleksandra Knežević.
Right on. Aleksandra Knežević. Aleksandra, you were with us a year ago. That was episode 8, if anybody wants to check it out. But we wanted to have you back on so you could talk about what you've been up to since then.
Thanks, Ohan, for having me again. So since then, a lot has happened. With my PhD research, of course, I talked last time when I was here, I discussed some main claims from my PhD research and basically what my PhD research is about. And now I'm back here with you to discuss the situation, the political situation that's happening currently in Serbia, and to provide some information about that and maybe try to discuss philosophically what are the main developments with regards to democratic leadership in Serbia. So maybe I could start with, so are you familiar with, have you heard about the situation in Serbia before I wrote to you?
Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. It was popping up on the news, but it'd be nice if to get a kind of detailed overview from you.
Mm-hmm. So the thing that's happening, so I asked you about whether you were familiar with the thing, because in Serbia we often complain how the Western media is not reporting on the situation in Serbia enough or even at all. So they started to report about events in Serbia after the resignation of the prime minister, which happened, and I have the date here. I think it was somewhere in January. January 28th. And after that, the Western news started to really cover the things that were happening and are still happening in Serbia. So, but before that, the tragedy happened in Novi Sad on November the 1st last year, when the concrete canopy of the newly renovated railway station in Novi Sad collapsed, and that resulted in 15 deaths of people who were there. And after that, later in November, students from the Faculty of Dramatic Arts in Belgrade, University of Belgrade, they were protesting in front of their faculty. So we have these peaceful vigils that happen every Friday from 11:52 when the canopy collapsed, and they last for 15 minutes as a way of honoring the victims. And the students from the Faculty of Dramatic Arts later in November last year, they gathered for these peaceful vigils, and then they were attacked by the SNS. SNS is the Serbian Progressive Party, which is the Vučić party. They attacked them, and this group of people, the attackers, also included people who are like high-ranking officials from the SNS party. And then after that, the students from the Faculty of Dramatic Arts decided to block the faculty, to occupy the faculty building, and this act was followed by Faculty of Philosophy, University of Belgrade, and also Faculty of Philosophy, University of Novi Sad. I think these two faculties were the first ones to respond after the students from the Faculty of Dramatic Arts blocked the faculty building. And then after that, in December, almost all universities, faculties from all the universities, so all universities in the end, were in full blockage. And also several high schools in Novi Sad, and later the blockages of the high schools would spread all across the Serbia. So this is what happened early in December, and the blockages of the faculties was accompanied by the 4 student demands. And these 4 student demands are put forward as a necessary and sufficient conditions for the ending of the blockages. And I can mention these 4 student demands. They are very simple, which makes them extremely powerful. So first demand is the publication of all documentation related to the Novi Sad railway station reconstruction. The second one is identification and prosecution of individuals responsible for attacks on students, professors, and citizens during peaceful vigils. The third one is dropping of charges against students arrested or detained during the protests. And the fourth one is increasing the budget for higher education for 20%. And I'm not sure now, but I think the first three demands are definitely not fulfilled. And the fourth one, I think it is, but the thing is that students are the ones who decide whether these demands have been fulfilled. So, and how students decide that? They decide that on student plenums. And this is how these blockages and how students have organized themselves. So student plenum are the main decision-making body. And that's a form of direct democracy, and which is a very avant-garde form of governance that we have currently in East Europe, but I think in whole Europe as well. I will stop now for your questions, but the story goes on.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you to continue. I guess the importance of the student plenums, were they relying on previous movements? Like what was the sort of infrastructure like with the student body?
Oh, that's a very nice question. So first of all, for this arising student movements, because this is not only the occupation on faculties or the mass protest, this is a student movement now, and it's huge. And it is said that this is the biggest student movement in Europe after the student movements in 1968. So that's a huge deal. Yes, that's a huge deal. And I think the way how students are organizing themselves relies on definitely what we had during the socialist Yugoslavia. During the socialist Yugoslavia, we had workers' self-management as a way of the unionizing and organizing the workers' places in Yugoslavia. So worker self-management is definitely something that student plenums could be connected to. So, of course, one would need to argue for that and describe how they are connected, but there is definitely certain connection, since worker self-management is also a form of direct democratic decision-making. However, I think people usually make more connections between what was happening during the 90s and early 2000s in Serbia with regards to students' protests. And what was happening then was also a way of, so students' protests then were also a response to the authoritarian regime. Slobodan Milošević was then the leader, the head of Serbia. And yes, these protests were basically a response to his authoritarianism and a way to establish democratic leadership in Serbia. And in Serbia, I think in 2001 were the first democratic elections. So it was not so long ago, unfortunately. And then, especially in the Vučić media, the current protests are connected to the ones that were happening during Milošević regime, and they are characterized as color revolution, the ones that are happening now. And the color revolution is a term that is used by the authoritarian regime to undermine the protests that are happening in a country, because color revolution means that these protests are being orchestrated by the West. And that's a way how the current regime tries to undermine what's happening in Serbia, to say, well, you have the money from the West, you have the influence from the West, and then these awful Western values will enter Serbia, and these awful Western values are usually those liberation values. I'm lacking the word now. So that's basically what's happening with respect to the historical connections. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And the topic of this concept of foreign infiltration is always used by governance. In the United States, it would be the East that's infiltrating, and there's always this very petty move. But were there also older, more experienced protesters that were involved? Like in the United States, in the solidarity encampments that we saw last year for Palestine in the United States, there was a lot of mentorship being done, which was incredible and actually helped facilitate the idea of encampment, the idea of making simple demands that can be reached in order to reach a fulfillment criteria rather than an endless protest. Is that what happened in Serbia?
Well, no. Students are completely without any guidance. So they are the ones who are guiding us, and we are the ones who are, well, as citizens, and I do not even want to mention the opposition parties, we are the ones who are completely incompetent, and we are the ones who do not understand that the power lays in our own hands, and students are there who are showing us the path forward. So basically, they do not have any guidance, and I'm quite sure about that because I have been in the past 2 months. I was visiting the plenums and the building of the faculty of Novi Sad, Faculty of Philosophy, University of Novi Sad. So I was there during their plenums, and I observed how they're making their decisions. I cannot share the details of the conversation they have there because that's private, and the reason why that's private and why they are so secretive about what's happening in plenums is because they're facing tremendous attacks and pressures, so they have to make these plenums very secretive because they do not want to be, they are protecting themselves basically. So yes, they do not have any guidance, and I think that there is a very strong reason why they do not have guidance, because people, the older generation really, I believe, doesn't understand the essence of democratic leadership. And I think the students are the ones who understand how democracy should function and what direct democracy is. And basically one of their main motives is the claim that they do not have a leader. And that's something that older generation really do not understand. What does it mean to not to have a leader? Because when you look at our history with Vučić, Milošević before him, and then even Tito, even though Tito is very, you can argue in different ways for or against Tito, but Milošević and Vučić are definitely the ones who are on the wrong side of history. So yes, so what students have been doing is showing us that we do not need someone to lead us. We are the ones who have the power, and they are showing us very practically how to exhibit this power, how to practice this power. And just to give you the example, so we have the big protest this Saturday in Belgrade, and we have high hopes for this protest. The last protest that was in Belgrade, which was also organized by the student movement, not the last one, but the main big one was, I think, early January. I think it was the 17th of January, and more than 100,000 people was there, which was a huge number. Yeah, it is a huge number. So now even more people are expected this Saturday because people from all Serbia will come. And now everyone is facing tremendous pressure, and people are also very scared because everything that Vučić is putting in public, his comments and his statements about everything. So people are scared. I'm personally scared, to be honest. So yes, for this big protest on Saturday, students are asking the citizens to organize themselves on the local level, and then to make these, I don't know how to say that in English, but so in our constitution, we are allowed to organize in certain decision-making bodies. It's called Zbor. I don't know, maybe, yeah. So it's an equivalent to student plenums. But on a local level, yes, citizens should unite and then discuss and to put forward their demands and what they need from the city, from the state. And so they are basically...
This is legally allowed.
Yes, it is legally allowed to do so. Yes, exactly. In our constitution, there is some part where it's explained the way how we can organize ourselves on the local level. And I'm not sure, but I think that also has something to do with the socialist Yugoslavia. It's just the term, the word Zbor seems very socialist, but I'm not sure about these things. So yes, so this is one of the ways how students are basically doing something regarding the ideology that they are now basically putting forward. So yes, ideologically speaking, the only ideology that they are is unifying for the student movement is the ideology of direct democracy, which can also be problematic in a way for some people who would like these students for them to be more transparent regarding the specific ideological values that the students are putting forward. But no, the strategy of the student movement is to be as open as possible, as non-specific as possible in order to unite people, and that's, I think, is a very good move, since society in Serbia the community in Serbia has been disintegrated on all levels, even on the level of families.
Yeah, wow. What information can you give us about the types of organization the strategies that individuals are using for the organization that would be useful for others, but wouldn't, of course, provide any information that would be detrimental to the movement? Like, if anybody's listening and they have a protest movement that's brewing in another country, what would be useful for them?
Well, for speaking only about the student movement, because how citizens will respond to the students' suggestions, I'm not sure. So I'm not sure whether citizens have enough resources, capabilities, and creativity to really respond to the students' suggestions or advice. So that would be a huge thing for Serbia if citizens would also appropriate this direct democratic decision-making. Yes, that would be huge. That would be really revolutionary in many ways. But I believe the citizens are much more passive in respect that they are just supporting the students. They are providing the students, for example, with food, they are joining them in protests, so they're physically there in the streets. But apart from that, the initiative is not coming from the part of the citizens. They're only there as parents. The citizens are the parents of the students, and students are the children, and they are the ones who are leading, which I think is hugely problematic. But this is what's currently happening. Maybe that will change in the near future. And for the students, how students specifically are organizing themselves, and I can speak about that because this is not a secret. They are transparent about how they're organizing internally. So basically, every faculty has its own student plenum. And student plenum, they do not function according to quorum, so they do not need. So everyone who is there, and the plenums could happen two times or 3 times per week. They decide on an individual level how many plenums they will have per week, and whoever is there, the majority of these people can vote for the certain things that are on the time. How do you say, like a daily.
Like an agenda.
Yes, daily agenda, exactly. So this is the first thing. So they do not need, the quorum is not a thing in plenums. The second thing is that for each plenum, moderators are changed. And there is students who would like to moderate plenums, they gather, and then for on every plenum, they vote. Well, students ask to moderate the next plenum, and then the plenum votes that allows them to moderate the next one. So that's how they are changing from plenum to plenum. And then the moderated, and this is specific for the faculty of Novi Sad, other faculty of philosophy in Novi Sad. So other faculties maybe have different internal structures. Maybe they have organized plenums in different ways. Well, they definitely have, but I know only this example from the faculty of philosophy because I was there. So basically, those who are moderating, they are the ones who are putting the daily agenda. And then each task on the daily agenda requires a discussion prior to voting. And this is like a basic example of deliberation or deliberative democracy combined with direct democracy, which is the strongest thing. And you're familiar with that from cognitive science, of course. And I'm referring to Helen Landemore and Hugo Mercier, who wrote about this, which is, so I'm basically experiencing. I have a very good empirical observation to confirm the argument that they put forward. And maybe you would like to go into details with what argument claims. So that's basically the second thing. So you have moderators, they're putting the daily agenda. Each task on the daily agenda requires a discussion before voting, and these discussions have very specific structures, which is also extremely interesting to observe. And I also participated in one discussion, and it's very interesting how I was completely, even though I have been watching this discussion for 2 months, participating in them is a completely different thing, because you are able to understand how you are not really socialized in these norms. And you see how, so this is basically a completely new discussion culture, let's call it like that. And one thing is to observe, completely different thing to participate. So I had this opportunity to see how ethnographers, anthropologists, participant observation really gain their knowledge in the field. Because through participation, you are able to somehow immerse yourself into these social norms that have been constructed in the past 3 months. And it was also my impression how quickly social norms can be constructed, and when we're talking about the social change or the impossibility of social change, it's not the problem of the ontology of social norms that social change is so impossible to achieve, but maybe some other problems are there. So yes, just to go back to how the plenums are organized.
Can you quickly tell us what it was like to be in, like what the difference was between observing versus participating? Is it possible to verbalize?
Well, I will try.
Okay.
So first, when you're observing, you see that they have different rules for discussion. So basically, the moderator, so you are able to put forward an opinion, a perspective, a claim, an argument. And then people can raise their hands to reply to your argument. But you're not allowed to respond to their criticism, to their comments and things like that. Because if you start to do so, then the discussion starts. And what is expected is that more people are introduced into this discussion. And in the end, you have the opportunity to respond to the criticism if you feel that's necessary. The moderator will give you the opportunity to do so. So that's the first thing. So that usually the only discussions that I had are in these academic circles where you still have certain norms of behavior, meaning that you will not interrupt someone, you will speak in good faith when you're putting forward a criticism. But discussion usually happens very naturally, and when it happens, people are not there to limit you when you're expressing your thoughts. And that was the first thing. So I was there. I was not participating as a student. I was there as a researcher, and I wrote a piece, an autoethnographic piece on the student movements and protests and the occupation of the university buildings. And I was there to check with them whether some part of my paper where I'm describing a discussion that happened in plenum, whether they give me the green light to publish it in this way. So and everything went fine, but I was there to explain myself and to explain the context of the paper, the context of this specific paragraph, and then the criticism was fierce. So it was very interesting to witness that, because they were like, it was very interesting to be there. But then, so I was in a specific situation because the whole discussion was about me, and I felt that I need to respond to their individual criticism. And every time when I try to do that, and it naturally happens to me, I was stopped by the moderator, and I felt like, what exactly is happening now? So it was really a very interesting, very brief, but very interesting experience. And then I realized how well they're completely... So this is a social norms that I'm not familiar with. And then I started to notice how when they present their arguments, they always write everything on paper, and to be brief, to be concise, to be very precise. So they developed a new culture of discussion, which is very interesting. And I think more research will have to be done on that.
Wow. And so you have strict adherence to this, but people generally adhere to the social norm, and it functions quite well.
Yes, they definitely adhere. No, they definitely adhere to the social norm. That's the reason why plenums exist, because people. So, and it's very nice because these social norms are not put by someone who has the power to enforce them. These social norms are created bottom up, and since they're created bottom up, and everyone had a right and also an opportunity to speak up and to discuss how these plenums are going to be structured. Therefore, they are following because their voice were included in the construction of these social norms. So they have zero reason not to follow these social norms because they are the ones who created them. So and the way how they are organized hierarchically, which is also amazing for Serbia, which is a very conservative society. This hierarchical organization and division of labor is something that struck me the most when I entered the faculty and when I listened to their plenums. So they really do not have a leader.
Wow. And so the moderators you had mentioned, but the moderators are chosen for the next event at the current one.
Yes. So basically, at the beginning of each plenum, the current moderators would say, well, for the next plenum, Oana and Aleksandra asked to moderate it, and then it's usually people just always vote for them, but they just have to check it with the plenum. But that's all.
And how many people were there, just to get a sense of?
Well, that depends. So before the big events, 200 people can be in the amphitheater, yes. But then for the regular plenums in between the events, when they are not discussing the main things, but they are just doing like this internal stuff, how to cleaning the faculty, how they are discussing with the other faculties and things like that, which are like day-to-day things, then less than 100, I would say, like 60, 70 people are there always present. So,
and sorry.
Mm-hmm. But I hear that, for example, at the Faculty of Philosophy in Belgrade, 400 people are sometimes there. Yeah, so it's a lot of people are active.
Wow. And just out of curiosity, the gender representation and the moderation.
That's also a very good question. So I was there. In gender representation in moderation is, I think, equal. I was there when the whole team, so 2 moderators, the one who is making the transcript of the discussion, because
secretary.
Secretary, yes, because after every plenum, there is like a transcript of the whole plenum discussion, and then they have like the repository of all of these transcripts, because all the decisions that have been made during plenums are then on paper, and then they can refer to previous plenums when certain discussions have been voted for, and then they can either vote again or maybe revise things. So yeah, so they have everything on paper, and the 4th person is the one who is making notes on people who are raising their hands. So, and I was there once when all 4 parts of this team were women. But yes, I'm noticing that there is like a small pool of people who are moderating and doing these things. So, and they are now repeating in themselves. So, yeah, so the gender representation there is quite nice and fair. But I think my impression is that this is mostly a female-led movement. Yes, and that's very interesting, because that was my impression, and I was afraid that I was biased, and maybe I'm just noticing female activism and female engagement and disregarding, because I'm a female, so I identify with that. But then I also hear from other people that that's also their impression. So I think women do feel more empowered in Serbian society currently, and they're also very brave and courageous, and they're also in all these working groups. And this is also another thing about how they are organized on the faculty level. They have different working groups. So the working group for moderators is the one of them. They have, for example, one for hygiene, one for the street organization, one for the emotional support, one for making the banners and the creative framework of the protests, so things like that. So they have several different working groups. New working groups are popping every day, and that's how basically they are organizing. And another important part about the organization is that each faculty has its own student plenums, but at the university level, these plenums have their own it's not representation, because that's not a correct word, but they have people from each plenum that meet with other people from other plenums in order to disseminate the information that happened on the individual plenums. But this group of people doesn't have any autonomy to make certain decisions. They're just there in order to spread the information, and then they decide certain things, and then they give this information back to individual plenums in order for individual plenums to vote these decisions. Just to give you the example in case this is confusing, so for the protests that happen every Friday, the Faculty of Medical Science, they propose that maybe this Friday we should not stand still, but after the 15 minutes vigils, we should we should walk during certain streets in the city and block the path there, and then the student plenum at this faculty votes this. Then they meet with the representatives from the from other plenums, from other faculties. They share this information, this suggestion, and then these people go back to their individual plenums, and then the individual plenums vote or do not vote for this suggestion. And this is how they're basically organizing themselves in order to retain this unity.
And this is why you need 2 or 3 meetings per week.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yes, it's called delegates, not representative, but delegates. So I'm not sure how, I think definitely once per week, but I think more than that, delegates meet and then they disseminate and share the information that's happening on the individual plenums.
And so just to kind of clarify your involvement, you are Serbian, you're a Serbian academic. You went presumably out of solidarity initially, or did you go with the explicit intention to study what was going on as well?
Well, with the explicit intention, because I needed a reason to be there. So I'm a doctoral student at the University of Belgrade, Faculty of Philosophy, so I have the right to an opportunity as a student to be there at the student plenums at the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Belgrade. But since I'm currently based in Novi Sad, I was not active in the decision making there. And the other thing is that my position is a bit compromised because I work as a research associate at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory, which is also part of the University of Belgrade. But we do not have students. Well, we are not teaching. We have students, doctoral students. I'm one of them. But we do not have any teaching duties, so we can be blocked by anyone. And so it's a different... Yeah, so faculties are the ones that are being blocked. Institutes are not blocked. So my position so as a researcher at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory, I'm actively there discussing with them from a research perspective, from this philosophical perspective, what's happening. And that somehow compromises my position to be actively involved in the student movement and student plenums. So the solution was that doctoral students at the institute, and we are employed there, so we are receiving salary for that, so we are not only doctoral students. We organized ourselves as researchers, and then we tried to get a position at the faculties of our interest to do research with them. So basically, that's how I was able to enter the Faculty of Philosophy in Novi Sad, because my colleague Igor Išpanović was there during the holiday New Year's Eve, and it was the time when no one was resting in Serbia. So this plenum voted that we are allowed to be there to do research. So they're the ones who gave us the approval. And that's how I had the opportunity and to be there with them for 2 months and to observe everything that's happening.
And so you wrote an autoethnographic piece, which is almost like an academic piece of self-journalism, right? Immersive journalism. Can you explain the process?
Yes, I could. Well, it happened. I was not planning to write an ethnographic piece, to be honest, but I was happy to share my impression of the protest with one person, Rory Archer, who then he advised me or suggested is maybe the better term. He suggested that I write an ethnographic or autoethnographic piece. And then, to be honest, I was not familiar with autoethnography before that. I spent a few days reading about autoethnography, philosophical writings on autoethnography, to understand how this method is positioned in this qualitative, quantitative, humanities, social sciences debates. And then I realized that I really could write such a piece. And basically, autoethnography is a method that is specific for anthropology, I guess, but I guess for social sciences and maybe in humanities more generally. And it means that you're using your personal, intimate, emotional experience in order to reflect the broader social and political topics. So basically, you're using your intimate lived experience as a way of constructing the meaning of the political and of the social. And that was a very cathartic experience for me, to be honest, because I realized that the past 3 months were emotionally extremely demanding for me personally, and I think I speak for all when I say that. definitely emotionally demanding, because you're experiencing hope for the first time after a long period, and you're allowing yourself to experience hope, because we were so the defense mechanism that we had to appropriate is that we are not allowing ourselves to hope for something better, because every time we would be disappointed. And this is the first time that you're allowing yourself to feel anything positive about your future in Serbia. So I'm definitely speaking for everyone when I say that it was extremely emotionally demanding. And this piece was very cathartic for me, because I was able to use all this build up emotions, which are not always very pleasant. For example, anger is one of the emotions that I'm experiencing every day for the past 3 months. Anger for everything that has been happening in the past 10 years. And then you're using this emotion in order to produce something that is creative, something that is good in itself. So that is what this autoethnography was for me. And basically it's...
And so how does that relate to the work that you went there to do? Because I thought you actually went to do the autoethnography.
No, I didn't go to do the autoethnography. Autoethnography just happened, but I went there to basically recruit participants for a focus group. So I was not even there to do ethnographic things, so to observe and to participate in this full sense of the method. So I was just there to observe in order to be able to recruit good participants for a focus group. And focus group is basically a group discussion where you're asking specific questions that you crafted before the event, and then you're using this data, you analyze it in order to make certain descriptive or explanatory claims about the movement. Or maybe even philosophical claims. So basically, the research that I'm about to conduct with my small research team, and it's I have my three colleagues in team. Vukan Markovic, he's a historian and philosopher of history. Ivan Lakicevic, he's a doctoral student at the Faculty of Economy. And Andrei Shevo, he's from Political Science Department. So 4 of us are doing this one focus group. I'm the one who will do the empirical part of the work, and then they will use the data in order to build certain theories and certain theoretical claims. I will, of course, help them with that, but I'm the one who is doing this empirical part. So basically, we have this hypothesis that the best way to understand the student movement, the rising student movement, is through 3 categories. One is values, the second one is politics, and the third one is ideology. So we basically try to understand what are the values that are unifying the student movement, and we try to understand these values in the context of Gen Z generation. And because the hypothesis is that this generation is different than the previous generation, which this is like a triviality, but different in very substantial ways. And we will, through the questions that we have, we will try to understand what these substantial ways are. We, of course, have certain hypotheses, basically with respect to not having a leader, horizontal hierarchy, the role of women in society, and things like that. So we try to understand these values within a particular generational context, and to understand the rupture that happened within this generation and the previous ones. So this is like the first part of our research. The second part of our research is to understand the political aspects of the student movement, because they have a very specific way how they are addressing political issues in Serbia, and also how they are addressing all the political parties and activist organizations and all the political agents in society, and they're basically limiting themselves from all the actions that these political groups are making in society. So they're completely apolitical in this way, but they're extremely political, of course. So yes, that's the second part of our research, to understand the political aspects and to also understand how they see the political goals of the student movement. And then, because these are really the open questions, and these are the open questions for them as well. And the good thing about the focus group is that you are able to construct the meanings while you are discussing. So this is a beautiful thing about qualitative methodology and qualitative methods, that you're constructing the meaning as the research goes. And then the last part is to understand the ideology, the ideological aspects of the student movement, whether student movement is a feminist one, or the student movement is a leftist one, or the student movement is a right-wing one, and things like that. And they have the claim about the minimum of ideology. So they really try not to put forward any statements in the public which others could use in order to somehow characterize them as this or that. So they're extremely strategic and extremely smart and intelligent.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what would, just to give people some context, do you need some water?
No.
Okay. Just to give people some more information, what would categorize it as a leftist movement versus a feminist movement? Is it doing either in your eyes? Has it managed to kind of avoid any type of classification?
Type of classification in what way?
But in terms of, have they managed to avoid ideologies so successfully that you wouldn't be able to classify it as a leftist movement or a feminist movement? Or do you think that it falls under one set of ideologies that, by virtue of their sort of apolitical and lack of commitment to one set of ideologies, do you think that categorizes them as something? Like, how would you describe the movement at this moment?
Well, so I have, unfortunately, I'm not sure that I'm the best one to, or I can share my subjective experience with the movement. So, and I think that, Faculty of Philosophy in Novi Sad is in Vojvodina, and Vojvodina is the north part of Serbia that has some autonomy with respect to the country or the central government. So, and it has a very specific history, very specific demography. So it's very multinational, multi-ethnic, and yes. So, and I'm also from Vojvodina, so I'm familiar how things are done there. So, when I'm in Novi Sad, then I believe that the student movement is a leftist movement, and a leftist, by leftist in this specific context, I mean anti-nationalist, which is a very good thing in Serbia, anti-nationalist. And I think, for example, that feminism is not something that it's not definitely the first thing that comes up to my mind when I think about the student movement, the current student movement. Even though females are definitely in the first rows, and they are the ones who are leading these specific working groups, who are moderating things, who are in the media, they're more present. For example, at the Faculty of Philosophy in Novi Sad, there is more women there. That's all. So, like, just by looking at numbers, more women are present there in the building. But I think that student movement is not feminist in a sense that they're putting forward female rights and discussing them more explicitly. Even though now on the 8th of March for the International Women's Day, there was also a protest in Belgrade organized by the students at the University of Belgrade, and this was a female-led and organized protest. And so, of course, in that sense, it is a feminist movement because it pays certain respects to women's issues and women's violence in Serbia. But my impression is that feminism is not something that is explicitly there. First of all, this is the movement against corruption, so this is anti-corruption protests. Then this is the first thing that you see when you Google in foreign media how these protests are described as anti-corruption protests. And yes, when you look at Vojvodina, then I would definitely say that they're anti-nationalists. Even though then you have these right-wing groups at specific faculties that would like certain things to function in a particular way, but they are not the majority. So, things are diverse. However, the student movement really is capable of protecting this ideological minimum in order not to be characterized as this or that. And I think that's a very good strategy, even though certain values and certain ideology I am more fond of, like any leftist values or feminism or socialism and things like that. But I think it's very good strategy not to limit the student movement with in any way, especially if you consider the whole social context in Serbia, who Serbian citizens are, how they think about ideology, how they think about feminism, how they think about socialism, how they think about any right-wing policies and things like that. So there is a lot of confusion ideologically, and these specific political themes in Serbia are highly controversial, and I'm not sure whether... I know some people who are arguing that this ideological minimum is a thing that is a problem for the student movement, and they have to be more specific and more transparent in order for to make certain progress with their demands and with everything that's happening in Serbia, to gain even more support or maybe political relevance. But I think for now, the student movement is a symbol, is showing us the way how to again be in a coherent society, how to have a community finally, how to feel connection with your citizens and things like that. So I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like then that it's a protest about the reformation of the social contract. Right?
Of course.
Right, rather than a explicitly social movement or a movement that targets a certain aspect of governance, it's the style of governance or the details. That's wonderful. Okay, that clarifies a lot. Because seeing anti-corruption protests in the media didn't necessarily allow me to understand exactly what was going on the inside. But that's great. I mean, I think that that's a strength of the movement, and that it'll allow people, it'll help address at least one of the problems, because there's a lot of intersectionality, even in a way that includes right-wing ideologies.
Exactly.
But yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So then what's next for the movement? So we're recording this on Tuesday, March 11th, and the protest is the protest on the 15th?
Yes, this
right,
Saturday.
Saturday the 15th. Okay, so I'll try to actually get this out tomorrow. But so what's next for the movement?
Well, that's a huge question. So what's next for the movement? The Vučić will definitely not fulfill the student demands. So that's a fact. We have now the technical government because the prime minister resigned. And then the question is whether we will have new elections or we will have the interim government. And the interim government means that current political structures have to have to include the opposition parties in order to form this interim government. And the main role of the interim government is to make possible the next elections. And Vučić already said that he will never have this interim government because he will have to collaborate with the opposition parties. So that's also not a solution. And then the third option is to have the technocratic government, which is formed of experts. And then these experts basically have to make these pragmatic decisions, again, with respect to the new elections. And this is also problematic because I'm not sure now about these details, but I think the experts or the technocratic government is also can be put forward within Vučić's current system. So these are also open questions. What will happen next with respect to our government? Because we basically do not have one now. We have only the technical one, which deals with the day-to-day issues, and it does not have the autonomy to make any huge, big political decisions. So that's the first open question. The second open question is what will be the next political, if I can say, expression of the student movement. So how exactly will they use their power politically? So maybe will they include the fifth demand with respect, for example, to maybe Kosovo or to Rio Tinto and things like that. So these are very controversial political issues that are currently open in Serbia. And the question is whether students will make this next step and including these very political things into their demands, which would be huge, but I'm not sure what's going to happen. And then that's also, you need, in order to make these political moves, you have to decide what your ideology is going to be. And if they would like to protect the ideological minimum, then they are somehow in a paradox. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think that for now, I really like this suggestion that students gave to citizens so that they organize themselves on a local level in these so-called zbor. And I think that's a way, so because of course, we do need concrete steps to be taken. And we have to think about the day after, how we call it now. What is going to happen after the student movement dissolves and students are back at the faculties and the faculties are not occupied anymore. So what will happen on the day after? That's definitely an open question. But I still think that the biggest thing about the student movement is that they are teaching us how to lead ourselves, how to think democratically, how to understand politics, not from the perspective of having a leader and then following their orders, basically, but to understand that politics belongs to us. And I think this is a very difficult and painstaking process, and that requires a lot of time. And for me personally, I would like much more if this occupation of the faculties of the universities lasts longer, because then we will have more time to learn from the students, than to politicize the movement in order to make concrete political steps. Because I think that students should continue with what they're doing, and for these concrete political steps we should include, the opposition parties should speak up. So they are the ones whose job that is. And for students, they are here just to somehow completely change the political culture and the political climate in Serbia.
So you alluded to the fact that one of the problems was that the older generations are there kind of as parents to the movement. And so it seems like they're showing up in support of, but don't see it as part of their lives as well. So they see it fundamentally as a student movement, which is it's a student movement, but it can be a student-led movement that sort of extends to broader society. Do you think that that's possible in the current moment in Serbia?
Well, that's the idea, and we also had 2 general strikes, and these general strikes included big collectives who were protesting, so this was like a symbolic thing. These 2 general strikes happened, one in January, I think, and the second one was on the 7th of March, so a few days ago, 3 days ago. And so the idea is that different parts of society see themselves as active contributors to the student movement, not only as supporters, but as people who are now appropriating the student demands as their demands. So they're not only supporting students, but they're also demanding things. And that's also happening with the academia in Serbia. So different faculties, I think, or maybe even the University of Belgrade, proclaimed, but I'm not sure about this, proclaimed that the student demands are their demands. So it was also a huge thing, but academia in Serbia, if I have to comment on that, I would say it's a bit slow, but I see progress there as well, with the way how they're also organizing themselves within the academia, within the universities and faculties, so there is some progress there. But yes, I think the idea is definitely that this becomes a student-led movement that includes different parts of society. We have IT workers, for example, who are also as a community very present at the student protests. Farmers as well, agricultural workers. They're a big, huge group at the student protests. They're there in their tractors on the streets. So it's very nice, and they're also very loud and really, their symbolic power, from my perspective, is also great. So that's the idea, that students lead people and help them to organize themselves and to include themselves, to have some initiative.
Right on. So is there anything else you want to speak about the movement specifically, or do you want to sort of transition into the theoretical implications of your work?
I just would like to check whether there is some... No, basically I covered all these main things that happened. Yes, but maybe we could discuss more theoretically.
Yeah. So
hopefully I will be able to respond.
Well, I would actually ask you to open up the conversation, because I know that that's one of the things that you kind of had in mind going into it, is sort of the broader theoretical implications of the work. So if you give us a sort of cursory view.
Well, theoretically speaking, I think that the student movement is a very fruitful thing to research from different perspectives, and definitely to understand this direct democracy is one thing that should be researched upon, and also to understand it from this historical perspective and also from political perspective, and to understand exactly whether direct democracy is even possible in a society like Serbian, given our history and given our reputation, to say it like that. And also another thing that is also very interesting to do research on is the relationship of the foreign political actors towards what's happening in Serbia, Russia, for example, and how Vučić is collaborating with Putin. They together characterize these protests as color revolution. And at the same time, there is a huge criticism that is happening in Serbia, criticism that's pointed towards the European Union, who is basically silent during this whole time, and they're meeting with Vučić in order how to stabilize the situation in country. So I'm not even sure. So basically, European Union is silent with that respect, which is quite unfair, given that we are fighting for democracy, and we are fighting for democracy because we do not have it currently. We are under the authoritarian regime for the more than past 10 years, and if you look more broadly, we never had democracy in Serbia, and the reason is that not that we are incapable of democracy, but because we are just being, completely. Our society has been disintegrated, and democracy requires communities, requires solidarity, requires discussion, requires free media, which we do not have. So we basically don't have any external foreign support in our fight for democracy. So that's another thing that could be also researched upon, especially in comparison to what was happening during Milošević regime, where student movement and opposition parties really did have the European support in bringing democracy to Serbia. So that's another set of research questions. And then also connected to that is everything that's happening with regards to Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto is the mining company who tries to mine lithium in the south parts of Serbia in a very destructive and ways that are detrimental to our fields, crops, nature in general. And the protests against lithium mining and against Rio Tinto have been happening in Serbia for the past, I think, 2 years, but you can check that. And yes, that's also one of the reasons why European Union is silent, because Vučić is allowing for these foreign actors to come to Serbia and to use the workers' force to use our lands. So that's also one of the things that should be researched upon. It's really happening now in this very specific point in history. So that's another thing. And then these are, of course, these very fine-grained specific things like solidarity, community building, emotional engagement of people, of citizens, of students. So all these specific nuanced aspects of the student movement could be also researched upon a lot, and hopefully that is going to happen in the next years.
Yeah, this is an interesting aspect of the detrimental use of the word peace as something that's just an entrenchment of the status quo, right? And I think that the European Union, obviously the United States, uses words like peace in order to shut down protest movements, which are actually fighting for peace through equity, right?
Exactly.
Rather than peace through this sort of derangement of the status quo. But yeah, right. So then it does feel a bit like there's an abandonment of the institutions that ought to be championing the ideals that the movement in Serbia is actually championing.
Exactly. Abandoned, yes, exactly. So we do feel abandoned. So that's really unfair, unjust, and I'm not sure how things are going to develop. So it's a really complex situation that's currently happening there, especially with respect to these foreign actors. So I'm not sure what to say. Research-wise, it's a very fruitful. It's very fruitful, and hopefully more researchers also in Serbia, but also foreign ones, will be engaged with the current situation. Because I think thinking about this direct democracy, I do not want to exaggerate now because I'm from Serbia, I'm very subjective, biased, and so on and so forth, but I think that for all those people who cherish democracy and who fight for democracy and who try to understand the essence of democratic leadership, I think what's currently happening in Serbia is extremely valuable. valuable not only for us but for all countries or that strive towards democracy, especially with the rise of right-wing politics all around Europe. So
it's a very powerful moment right now for the students to be organizing in such a way in Serbia.
Exactly.
Hopefully we can have you on again in a couple of months. If you're here for the conference in May, that'd be amazing. But so what's next for you?
Well, for me, I will be in Belgrade this Saturday, and then next week I will hopefully conduct this focus group. Then I will analyze the data, and well, we will decide how to chop this data into several papers, and then to see how to continue with the publishing process, which of course will. This is a long process, but yes. So that's with respect to my research. I will stay at the Faculty of Philosophy in Novi Sad. I have several people who are students who are interested in forming a research group, so that they basically research themselves, which is very nice. I have 5 women, so that's also very interesting to say. 3 of them are from psychology. One is studying some language, I think Italian language, and the 5th one is from the journalism studies. So with them I will see how I can help them so that they can produce some nice research about what's happening there in the building, which is a very nice first-person perspective on the whole thing, which is also scientific perspective. So yeah, so that's next for me. Hopefully next time when I come to your podcast, everything in Serbia will still continue at the same pace.
Right on. And I will make sure to add anything that you send me attached to the video or the podcast, so you have more links there.
Yes.
And when the autoethnographic work is published, nice. we can add that as well.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on, Aleksandar.
Thank you very much, Alan, for this opportunity to share what's happening in Serbia.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Perfect.